construction and energy projects. We're even hearing reports of China-linked groups using American AI to spread misinformation about anti-data center content. Their intent is clear. China will use any means necessary to undermine American AI and other key American industries so that they, not the United States, will lead the world's future. The Biden administration's and congressional Democrats' misguided Inflation Reduction Act played into China's hands, greatly expanding their tax credits for wind and solar with the ultimate aim of phasing out American fossil fuels. China quickly exploited these tax credits, setting up factories in the United States to build their solar panels here. To compete with and win against China in these key areas, the U.S. economy needs firm legislative support. With the passage of H.R. 1, the Working Families Tax Cut Act, Republicans ended the Biden-era climate slush funds and provided key support for the U.S. economy. H.R. 1 stopped China from benefiting from our tax provisions, prohibiting foreign entities of concern from eligibility. The bill included key provisions to support expansion of our reliable domestic fossil fuel production, bolstering American energy dominance. The bill also provided $7.5 billion to expand the United States domestic critical minerals capacity, which is essential for the development of American AI and semiconductors and much more. China has been aggressively accelerating its shipbuilding, leveraging its critical minerals chokehold and taking punitive measures against American businesses. But H.R. 1 has strengthened our hand against China directly by addressing many of those concerns. Our founding fathers, 250 years ago, understood that people are endowed by God with unalienable rights or unalienable rights, and that government derives its power from the consent of the governed. But the Chinese Communist Party views individual rights as granted by and subordinate to the will of the party. If the United States loses its economic competition with China, the Chinese Communist Party will leverage its economic victory to impose that ideology in a form of oppression all over the world. And to face that, we must win. So today, I can't thank you guys enough, these amazing expert witnesses that are joining us, and I thank you, my colleagues, for joining in this conversation. I want to first introduce the Honorable Joshua Hodges, who is the Commissioner for the U.S.-China Economic Security Review Commission. Commissioner Hodges is a seasoned national security and foreign policy expert who was appointed by Speaker Johnson to serve as commissioner this last year in May. Next, we have Mr. Tozy, right? Senior Director for China Policy at America First Policy Institute. Mr. Tozy is a seasoned China expert, most recently serving as Deputy Staff Director of the Congressional Executive Committee on China. Next, we have Dr. Tiffert, a distinguished research fellow at the Hoover Institute and a historian of modern China. Dr. Tiffert co-chairs Hoover's program on the U.S., China, and the world. Finally, we have Mr. Alex Epstein, who is a philosopher and energy expert who argues that human flourishing should be the guiding principle of energy and environmental progress. And with that, I want to turn it over to you, gentlemen, and provide you with an opportunity to provide your opening remarks. We'll start with Mr. Hodges.
Chairman Burleson, thank you for organizing an important discussion that often gets viewed solely through the lens of geopolitical discourse. Today's conversation on competition with China and its impact on working families is incredibly timely, and we appreciate you and the other members making the time for it. The U.S.-China Economic Security Review Commission is a bipartisan commission established 25 years ago to review and assess the Communist Party of China's activity as it relates to the United States and national security issues. China is pursuing a comprehensive, long-term strategy to create levers of control and to dominate future technology, data, economics, and manufacturing. China regularly competes as an ecosystem. Today, the United States is winning on the economic fundamentals when it comes to innovation, capital markets, productivity, but losing on coordination and on speed. If the status quo continues, they are likely to catch up or surpass the United States within the next 3 years or less on a number of critical sectors. That's why we appreciate your time today and the work you're currently doing in Congress. It's the finding of the China Commission that the topics are increasingly intertwined and should be treated as national security issues that are fundamental to address. The Commission has made a number of recommendations on this front, and we'll provide those to your staff. It's for this reason that H.R. 1 and the provisions included within are incredibly timely and impactful on supply chain specifics. The work that was taken by Congress last year set the stage for the United States catching up and reversing past mistakes that put us on a collision course to fall behind with China. The legislation is both necessary and substantial, and Congress should consider follow-on actions to expand it into a more systemic, competitive approach. China has determined it does not need to out-invent America to win. It seeks instead to control materials we build with and slow down what we build and to use our tools against us. In 2025, for the first time, China revealed it is willing to use its levers for geopolitical purposes. The world watched as that lever of rare earth minerals was pulled so that China could rebalance the negotiating table in its favor. That strategy is on full display. Control the inputs, use that control, and where it can't control, seek to delay or influence American perception. Just as you referenced in your opening testimony, sir, the OpenAI just documented a China-linked campaign amplifying opposition to American data centers. This reveals that Beijing sees a decision line that matters. It shows the CCP's influence is active here at home. The intent is to slow down the U.S. ecosystem. Every month, a fab, a data center, or processing facility doesn't get built in America is a month that China gains ground. For our side of the competition is simple to state and hard to execute. We have to build better, deploy faster, and secure the arteries that feed vital sectors across the United States. I look forward to the discussion today. I'll keep my opening comment short so we can get into the roundtable.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chairman Burleson, Congressman Perry, and Congressman Higgins. Thank you for the invitation. It's good to be back on the Hill. I was, as you mentioned, with the Congressional Executive Commission on China for many years, which was the sister commission to Mr. Hodges' commission, too. We just want to do a little bit of, I think, big picture table setting here, too. Having been on the Hill, I understand why we have to work within these jurisdictional boundaries and why it's called economic competition. But I think it's important for us to understand that it's broader than that. It's even broader than strategic. And the way I would like to describe it is systemic, that China is a systemic rival. It seeks to challenge and displace the United States as the guarantor of that American-led post-war order. And it does it on multiple fronts. It wants to replace the United States as the global hegemon. They have this 100-year marathon, as Michael Pillsbury calls it, this strategic vision. We see it as they create these alternative global alignments. We see that with the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. We see it with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We also see them trying to displace the dollar as the world reserve currency through instruments like the petro yen. Whether or not it will succeed is an open question, but this is the ambition. We see, the hegemon set standards, so we see them trying to set standards in the realm of technology. That's true with telecoms and telecommunications, but also especially with AI and why it's important to win that race. We even see them trying to reset standards with regards to human rights. In 2024 at the United Nations during the Universal Periodic Review, China received criticism for its terrible record on civil and political rights, but they redefine rights as a right to development. Again, the hegemon gets to set those standards. There was a book that was written in 1999 that's available in English, but it was written first in Chinese by two PLA colonels, Colonels Wang and Colonel Chow, called Unrestricted Warfare. And I think it's very important to understand this thesis. It sees everything as a battle space, okay, up to and including the kinetic. So when we see that we have a problem with fentanyl, where do those precursors come from? It's a reverse opium war strategy that they wield against us. Lawfare, and how they use our court system against us. Glenn Tifford here at Hoover University has been very valiant in pushing back against that Chinese lawfare thing. It's a very important case. Maybe he'll talk about that too. But the way that they target, and they target things systematically. In the 1990s, we bought into this China fantasy. okay, this idea that history had ended, and that by engaging with China economically, we could integrate them into this American-led order. That was a big mistake. The PRC, under the Chinese Communist Party, had a very long-term vision. Rare earth magnets. Why are rare earth magnets important? Because they're important for our military ordnance, our military our stockpile for targeting there. In 1995, there was a GM subsidiary called Magnequench that was purchased by a Chinese consortium, included a couple of Deng Xiaoping's sons. It was fronted by Archibald Cox Jr., the chairman of the Watergate prosecutor son, Archibald Cox Jr. And at the time, our Defense Department, our then Defense Department, objected on national security grounds. State Department said, no, this will help our relations with China. Most of the concerns was the jobs, and there was a promise to keep the jobs there for at least 5 years. That was broken. The equipment and the know-how was shipped back to China. Okay, today that is, as Mr. Hodges referenced, a point of vulnerability that they wage against us. Today, carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is important for drones, okay? There's a US company, Zoltec, based in Missouri, that is a subsidiary of a Japanese company. The China National Building Materials Group, state subsidized, is undercutting on price there. Competitively, it becomes very difficult. Drones are only a certain portion. Most of carbon fiber is used for wind turbines. American companies, other companies look for the lowest cost there. We are essentially subsidizing our enemies. This is part of a grand strategy. When I was still with the commission in December, I went to Japan. I raised this issue with our embassy there, and they were not aware of this. But since Toray, the parent, is a Japanese company, alerted them to this important thing. We recently at AFPI published a document on what we call a Pax Composita. It has to do with how we can push back on this attack on carbon fiber. We have a Pax Silica, where we try with our chips industry to work with allies and like-minded countries to cleanse supply chains, keep them non-red. We need to do the same thing. We're doing the same thing with regards to drones. Other countries such as Taiwan are also important in that, but also clearly our NATO allies and Japan. Just on AI, just briefly, the targeting of AI. What we're seeing is that while we still have an advantage and a technological edge, China is again undercutting it. And we see American corporations that are utilizing DeepSeek models, AI models there. Microsoft is considering doing that as well, again, to cut costs. AI, why is it important? George Orwell says that he who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. Try with DeepSeek to ask any of the 3 T questions: Tibet, Taiwan, or Tiananmen, and you'll see what happens. So this is very much a battle for the mind here. I think that we can stop here and go into Q&A, but there were a number of people here in Congress that in the 1990s had an awareness that engagement with China was very perilous and was a dead end. My former boss, Chris Smith, even Nancy Pelosi, to her credit, was alert to that idea of the China fantasy. But most people bought into that theory of engagement, that by engaging with China, by trading with it, they would become more like us. It's the opposite that has happened. And with that, I'll leave it to my colleagues, but we can go more into issues like why joining the WTO and allowing China, that was a terrible mistake. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Burleson, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to address this critical topic of winning the economic competition with China. Winning that competition is vital to the sovereignty, security, and prosperity of the United States, but victory will not come easy, it will not come quickly, and it will not come cheaply. Moreover, I cannot tell you when victory will arrive. This is a competition that could run for years, and we must approach it in that way. We need a strong team with capable players across multiple positions and a deep bench to stay in it. Tight coordination with our allies and partners will be a force multiplier that would be unwise to forego. China did not stumble into technological parity with the United States in critical domains. It built that capacity deliberately over decades through industrial policy, entrepreneurial energy, technology transfer, and generous investments in infrastructure and people. We awoke belatedly to the true nature and scope of that challenge, and only now are beginning to assemble a coherent response. The signs of a turnaround are encouraging, and the Working Families Tax Cuts Act of 2025 is playing a major role in that. One cannot speak honestly about the way China has closed gaps in its national power with the United States without mentioning illicit methods such as misappropriation of IP, espionage, and circumvention of export controls and technology controls. These are real and continuing. We must combat them resolutely. At the same time, I think we've done ourselves a disservice by overweighting these factors in our policy debates and responses, and underweighting the more fundamental and decisive role that shrewd bargaining, competitive zeal, and strategic supports have played in China's successes. In a great many instances, China did not have to steal because it could acquire what it wanted openly from foreign universities and in the marketplace. Foreign partners voluntarily transferred knowledge to China and helped it nurture world-class local competitors. And PRC officials were not disinterested parties. They put their fingers on the scales at every opportunity through policy support, discriminatory treatment, and protectionism. Even so, success was not assured. China had to do many things right. And so let me turn to that for a moment, because if you want to beat a team, you need to study it. China is determined to secure its own political and economic destiny, and central to that are the key technologies, supply chains, and industries of tomorrow, which Xi Jinping calls the commanding heights. He is gambling that seizing control of these commanding heights will shore up the CCP's grip on power, boost China's sputtering economy, offset an accelerating demographic crisis, and establish China's ascendancy over the U.S., not only in the Western Pacific, but also in strategically important domains elsewhere around the world. The metaphor of commanding heights is no accident. Martial language suffuses the discourse of technology competition in China. The CCP is pursuing a carefully planned and choreographed military-style campaign in which Beijing identifies goals, establishes the policy frameworks, and then mobilizes eye-popping resources in a whole-of-state effort that seeks to align government at every level, financial markets, industry, academia, and the military to achieve its goals. I'm not sure the U.S. has ever operated in a comparable way short of the temporary emergency of World War II. That asymmetry is part of the problem. China now accounts for roughly 29% of global manufacturing, against about 16% for the United States. It leads in solar, batteries, EVs, and shipbuilding outright. In semiconductors, the hardest case, self-sufficiency, has moved from roughly a third of domestic demand to about half of domestic demand in the past 2 years. The National IC Fund alone has directed roughly $150 billion into the semiconductor sector. That's 3 times what Chips and Science allocated. And individual provinces and cities have provided billions more. Without concerted action by the U.S. and its allies, China may soon dominate the market for many industrially critical mature node applications, which would give it leverage akin to what it has today over rare earths. The Nexperia case last year, which threatened the chip supply for global automakers, was a wake-up call. The newly adopted 15th Five-Year Plan doubles down on this model, animated by an even starker assessment in China of the need to unlock indigenous technological innovation and de-risk from a United States that is seen as intent on subverting China's rise. Independent estimates put China's total industrial policy spending somewhere between 1.7 to 5% of total GDP, far beyond what any OECD economy spends. Beijing is imposing tighter controls on that spending and accountability over it, but the fire hose has not gone slack. 2026 science and technology spending is still rising faster than the overall government budget. They are flooding the zone, just selectively in the technologies identified as national priorities. Security and self-reliance are the watchwords of the day. A nation of 1.4 billion people has weight, but mass and brute force alone are insufficient to explain China's achievements. One secret of China's success has been the space the central government allows for local initiative. The central government says jump, and localities and firms fiercely vie with one another to say how high. Beijing has encouraged a ferment of experimentation, competition, and entrepreneurialism to deliver on its goals, though Xi Jinping's penchant for tight control risks suffocating this golden goose. This has admittedly engendered extraordinary duplication of effort, corruption, and inefficiency on a massive scale across the country. But it also generates brutal selection pressures to adapt and innovate in a tournament where only the fittest will survive. BYD, the global electric vehicle giant, exemplifies this process. Yes, it has benefited from myriad kinds of state support, but it has also been tempered by intense domestic competition and produces world-class products as a result. Walling ourselves off from such products cannot be the extent of our strategy. At best, this buys time. We either find a way to compete with China as it is, or cede one industry after another to it and lose our self-determination. Fortunately, the U.S. is not standing still. We are reshoring. The headline numbers are encouraging. TSMC, Samsung, Micron, and Texas Instruments have real fabs under construction, several ahead of schedule. But the honest read of the construction data is that we have yet to achieve a real broad reshoring boom. Spending is actually down from its 2024 peak, even as demand explodes. The task now is converting those funded announcements into qualified shipping volume and extending support past the fab into the materials, tools, and packaging layer, where China's control is arguably greater and deeper. Energy dominance. This is fast becoming the actual constraint on everything else. AI data centers could account for close to a fifth of new U.S. electricity demand by 2030. And that demand is now competing directly with the electrified factories we're trying to reshore. The policy answer has to be genuinely all of the above. Nuclear, gas, transmission build-out, faster permitting, financed in a way that doesn't simply push the cost onto residential taxpayers. Rare earths and critical minerals. The Pentagon's equity stake in MP Materials with a 10-year price floor and guaranteed offtake for its new magnet facility is the right template. It treats material security as an industrial policy problem, not a trade remedy problem. We need similar actions at multiple sites and paired with processing capacity in the US, Australia, and Japan, because mining without separation and refining capacity solves only half of our dependency on China. Fortunately, the WFTCA is a powerful step in the right direction across all of these domains. Its capital cost provisions are well designed and producing real measurable reductions in the after-tax cost building of semiconductor, pharmaceutical, and mineral processing capacity on US soil. I therefore end upbeat. We're turning a corner, and now we as Americans must all row harder and in sync, because China is. And I welcome your questions and discussion. Thank you.
Epstein.
Thank you. How do I turn this on? Did you figure that out? Yes. Beautiful. All right. Yeah, I used to not care, but then Jeffrey came along, so he's Epstein, I'm Epstein. Yeah, exactly.
I've been mispronouncing it all this time.
It's okay. All right, so I have kind of 5 points I want to introduce, and then happy to answer any questions about them. But to me, these are the 5 points, at least most relevant to energy and China. So point number 1 is China's chief advantage over the US in energy and everything else is far greater industrial freedom. So we're often taught that, well, China has an advantage because they're willing to spend more, they're willing to dictate things. But America has proven in the past that by far the best quote-unquote industrial policy is freedom with property rights. So to give you a sense of how powerful this is, in the 1870s, the first long-distance pipeline built in the US, the Tidewater pipeline, went from conception to completion safely in 6 months. You cannot do that with a yoga studio, or upgrading a yoga studio in America today. So what's happened is not that we're too free and we need to adopt anti-freedom things in any way, it's that we are radically less free than China. Basically, your ability to build things is overwhelmingly a function of how quickly you can go from idea to execution. In the United States, our entire permitting system makes that basically impossible. And so if we're at all serious about being a country in the future, competing with China, et cetera, we need radical permitting reform, and this should be bipartisan. So we need to aggressively reform NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. So that's something that it was originally supposed to just do a bonus review for projects, so just follow the laws and then just do a bonus review. And now the bonus review can literally kill projects, or activists can sue over the bonus review and delay a project for 5 years. So NEPA needs radical reform. This affects projects Republicans care about and Democrats care about. The Clean Water Act in its current state is an atrocity. So it targets both gas pipelines and transmission lines as a menace to water quality. Guess what gas pipelines and gas pipelines and electric transmission lines have in common? They literally cannot meaningfully contaminate the water because they don't have any liquids or solids to go in the water. And yet the state of New York and others routinely kills these things in the name of fake justifications like turbidity. Do people know what turbidity means? It means temporarily muddy water. So that's what we're destroying our economy for, and that's why we have way too high natural gas prices, because we can't build pipelines to take our abundant gas to market because we're afraid of muddy water. And at the same time, New York is constantly creating 1,000 times as much muddy water just to keep their ports clear. So Clean Water Act is a disaster. Republicans and Democrats should agree on this. Now we have a more contentious one for today's Republicans, permitting certainty. The idea that once you get a permit, it should be a real permit. It should be final. Presidents love to deny permitting certainty. So we had Biden killing twin metals, killing oil and gas projects. Now President Trump likes to use it to stop wind. Both parties have to recognize that you cannot be a real country if the president can revoke permits at will. We need permitting certainty. It should be bipartisan. So number one is China's chief advantage over the U.S. is far greater industrial freedom. If we don't at minimum radically reform NEPA, Clean Water Act, and have permitting certainty in permitting legislation, we've got a very short shot clock right now, or very short clock to do that, you can't seriously talk about competing with China. Okay, number two is China is expanding its reliable power by building new coal plants. So there's a mythology that China is winning on industrial electricity because they're adopting solar. So this is a misunderstanding of what is happening. If you look at China, they're always building new coal plants. They have a lot of coal plants in the pipeline, and they're using a lot of solar at the same time. So what's happening here? What they're using the coal plants for is reliable power, what you can call capacity. So the ability to generate electricity when needed in the exact quantity needed. Baseload is actually not quite the right term, but what you really need is just dispatchable, reliable power, whether it's baseload or it's flexible. Because when you have a peak event like Storm Fern, you don't just need the baseload, you need the flexible peak power. And what we saw during Storm Fern is something I've said for years, which is solar and wind can go near zero at any given time. So solar and wind, this is point 3, do have a use, and China is making use of it, but they're not using it as reliable power. They're using it as a fuel saver for reliable power. So solar and wind, you should not think of as real power sources. You should think of them as fuel savers. When the sun shines and the wind blows, you can save gas, you can save coal. And in countries with really expensive fuel, that can make a lot of sense. Now, guess what? The United States does not have really expensive fuel, so most of our solar and wind is a complete just burning of money and harming our grid. But in general, we should be open to solar and wind when the fuel savings outweigh the cost of the panels and turbines, of the transmission and the distribution, which again in the US is rarely the case and would be even rarer if we had good permitting policy. But with China, it makes more sense because they don't have all the same domestic resources. And for solar, they're not only saving fuel with solar, but they have the solar industry where they're making quite a bit of money selling us solar panels that we're way overspending on. Okay, so their advantage is industrial freedom, that's point 1. Point 2 is they're expanding their reliable power through new coal plants. Number 3 is they're using solar as a fuel saver for reliable power, not reliable power itself, and they're selling it to us. And number 4, and this relates to the big beautiful bill, America's attempt to use solar as a reliable power source via subsidies and mandates has been a total disaster. So we have preferred solar in all these different ways. We've subsidized it. Fortunately, the new subsidies at least have come to an end. We still have 10 years more of some of the wind subsidies in the pipeline, so we didn't kill enough of those, but still, it's a lot better. But we're doing that. The markets don't impose any penalty for unreliability. So we have huge problems with our electricity markets. And many states still mandate large amounts of solar and wind through what are called renewable portfolio standards. So we have all of these preferences. And what are these, and at the same time, we have all these punishments on fossil fuels. So what happens? We are artificially lowering the supply of reliable electricity. And at the same time, we're artificially increasing the demand through electrification. And now we have this huge organic demand from AI. So I was warning of an electricity crisis before the AI era. Now it's just totally, totally dire. So we need to abandon this idea of subsidizing, mandating intermittent fuel savers. We shouldn't be subsidizing or mandating anything, but certainly not things that aren't reliable. And what do we need? And this is point 5. We need a radical increase in industrial freedom. And the two areas I'd point to are, one, tech-neutral permitting reform, so every kind of technology is much, much easier to permit in the ways I laid out. And we need tech-neutral electricity policy that values reliability and properly devalues unreliability. And if we do this, we have a real chance of being a serious country that's growing and can meet the AI opportunity, which is not only a security issue, I think it is the chance for the greatest improvement in human life since fossil fuels caused the energy revolution. So happy to talk about that as well.
Open dialogue, there's some roundtable discussion, so with that, I'll open it up for Representative Higgins.
Alex, you mentioned, and I appreciate the work and your ongoing communication, but we consider it an asset.
Thank you.
We don't always agree. This may be
Well, that's my job is to tell you what I think is true. That's part of the reason why people listen. That they believe I believe what I'm saying, at least.
part of that, but I always listen.
I appreciate it.
So, you mentioned permit continuity. And, like Reliance, reliable permitting, the major problem. I'd like to drill down on that.
Yeah, let's do it.
You rightfully identify that as an issue for American industry. And, we are quite aware we have, in deference to our Chinese friend, we have like almost a yin-yang clarity with our executive branch, right? Like every 8 years.
Right.
We're going from yin to yang. So, how would you suggest, we're Article 1, we swear an oath to the Constitution, the founders, effectively granted sweeping powers to the executive. So, any permit that would require executive authority and essentially the signature of the president, how would you constitutionally remove that authority?
This is a great issue. I think of it as the opposite problem. I don't think the current authority and the way the administrative state functions is constitutional or even defensible. So the basic structure is supposed to be Congress passes the laws, the executive faithfully execute the laws. We have this idea of a government of laws, not of men.
Gentlemen will yield for an observation, though. Therein lies the interpretation of existing law.
Yes.
And the executive absolutely has the right to reinterpret laws as if they believe were wrongfully interpreted by the previous
True.
administration. So again, I ask you, how would you constitutionally address that as it would through congressional authority, Article 1 authority, without injuring Article 2
Well,
constitutional?
So in addition to, Congress needs to write clearer laws. So that's one thing. They need clearer laws. And what I'm saying with the permitting certainty is you need laws saying that once you have a permit, then you cannot just overturn it. And in fact, the way you could just have the permit be final, and then if the company actually violates like the law in statute, then the executive can prosecute them. That's different than the permitting thing. Keep in mind, the founders didn't even intend there to be permitting. So permitting is, the whole premise of permitting is guilty until proven innocent, and it's a fundamentally un-American premise. The only justification.
So I think you hit it. When I think we concur that given the modern phenomena of executive reversals
Yeah.
of industrial permits, which is certainly a 21st century issue, Congress has to write legislation that includes prohibitive language and more clear, like granular language that can be less easily interpreted this
Yes.
way or that way. Would you concur with
Yes.
that?
Definitely.
Okay, so, but we do agree that in order to, we can't just say, well, presidents can no longer, executive branches no longer has the authority to interpret an existing permit. They have to be able to do that, or else we'd be interfering with
I mean, the
their
permit is a
constitutional
creation
authority.
of Congress. The Congress can attribute whatever stipulations to it wants. It can say, this permit, once you pass this stage, it's done, and then the only recourse is just if you're violating the law, then you can do it. So I think we can dramatically constrain the executive. Now, the counter to that is, well, there's lots of other things the executive can do, and that's true, and we should shore those up too. But in general, the vision is a government of laws, not of men. It should be obvious what the executive will do with these things. We're far from that, but that's the model. I don't
Yes, sir.
want one person having this authority.
Well stated, respectful of everyone's time. I have a question regarding Chinese strategy that I'd like to direct to Mr. Tozy. The Chinese culture, or the Asian culture, is like Miyamoto Musashi wrote, that make your everyday stance your combat stance, and your combat stance your everyday stance. Be always prepared in a natural state for martial engagement. Sun Tzu wrote that excellent warriors win before engaging in war, and effective armies overcome the enemy without fighting. So the Chinese culture, they're not doing anything that we haven't seen that they haven't done for 7,000 years. They're posturing themselves, for successful engagement with all entities. And that would include martial engagement, but it doesn't preclude much. It doesn't require martial engagement. It doesn't require war. So how would you advise us to deal with things like AI, which is a big concern of ours, a big concern of mine? I would turn it all off if I could. I think it's a serious threat, but how would you advise Congress to deal with like states' rights as it relates to AI and federal mandates and federal law as it relates to AI regarding our need to counter China's progress?
So I think, first of all, it's good that you do mention sort of the Chinese tradition, because understanding that is very important. And you mentioned Sun Tzu, and the idea is to win without fighting. And that's why really where China excels is in the cognitive domain. And I just had an article last week on cognitive warfare directed at Taiwan, which I'm happy to share with you as well. They're also, the idea of the art of war is grand strategy. There's also what's called the 36 stratagems that are more tactical. And one of them, the very first one, is it says to cross the ocean while deceiving heaven. And that really was the stratagem throughout the so-called reform era that China utilized to attract foreign direct investment, to allow for that accession to the WTO, and we really allowed ourselves to be deceived. If anything, we owe Xi Jinping a debt of gratitude because he took the mask off their intentions are much clearer. But if you look at the World Trade Organization, for example, we let in a predatory mercantilist power that subsidizes, not just industries, but national champions, as we mentioned with the BYD, for example, as Glenn mentioned, that steals intellectual property and is always going to have a comparative advantage on cost because they utilize forced labor and suppressed labor. Even labor that's paid, we're seeing because of their export-oriented economy, and this is a vulnerability point for them too. The way they treat their own labor. Now, so the first thing that we have to do is to understand what the strategy is, to understand that the ideal for them is to win without fighting, and that is what the strategy is. As to AI, how do you put the genie back into the bottle? And I think that's the big problem, because if we do restrict AI, China is not going to have the same restrictions in place there, and that makes it very, very difficult. I think it is important, and the Pope Leo had the encyclical on artificial intelligence. It's something I think there are moral issues that do have to be weighed here. But at the end of the day, we cannot unilaterally disarm. We do want to respect, we talk about power. We need reliable power sources to power AI. I live out in Prince William County, where we see a lot of data centers, and the demands on power there as well. They're only going to increase as the demand for AI increases demand for energy. There are technologies like molten salt reactors, small modular reactors, I think, that are promising, that also are green too, but are also capable of meeting our needs. We're going to have to invest in that. And I know personally, I get that. Yeah, it's data centers are great and necessary, but I don't want them in my backyard, and that's where I live. But that's something that I think we do have to come to terms with. It's going to be very difficult to put the genie back into the bottle. So I don't know if that addresses your concerns there.
If you mind, sir, just to jump in on this, on the strategy question, this is an area the Commission has looked at extensively. And from our view, the CCP's efforts extend well beyond critical minerals. It really does touch one of our recommendations last year was on grid security, because that's, to your point, that sort of the ability to carry out a fight before they actually have to. They want to have as many levers as possible to shut off our ability to maintain that fight as quickly as possible. And it's my opinion that they are pre-positioning these assets and our water supply, our critical infrastructure, so that they can have that power. And it's well known, it's publicly documented that they are doing that, and that we're continuing from a business perspective to deepen American companies' engagement with Chinese activity and Chinese companies. That's putting us at higher and higher risk. And I think Mr. Tosi referenced sort of the Microsoft debate as to whether or not they're going to use Chinese models for some of their AI. That should be incredibly alarming, because it connects two of the issues that you raised that you're very concerned about, the Chinese strategy and AI. And Microsoft is embedded across almost every national security tool and office in the United States. It should be very alarming and very concerning. And it's my opinion that this is all designed to increase Beijing's ability to turn off these levers of power that we have to keep everyday life going here in America.
Respectful of everyone's time, I'd yield back to the chairman. Perhaps Dr. Glenn has something to add, but I've exhausted my time.
Oh, there's no time.
Doctor.
Thank you. One of the things that is on my mind with regard to the competition in AI is that the United States is, I think, clearly leading for the time being in the technologies that most people associate and experience with AI, which is LLMs. ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude. But there is a much larger world of AI, actually.
That's not where the real power in AI
Indeed, that's right. And I worry that actually the smarter strategy is not to put too many eggs in one basket. Right now, the capital markets are flowing only in one direction. We need to diversify risk because there could be disruptive technologies that, because China
What do
is
you mean
losing.
by that, is flowing in one direction?
Well, to support large language model providers like OpenAI and Anthropic in particular, when there are other potential approaches to AI, and in particular embodied AI, for example, in robotics and diffuse technologies. That is where a real battleground is going to be that the US needs to devote greater attention to. And I think perhaps as national strategy to gently steer and suggest that our brilliant minds who are working on AI devote serious attention to these areas because China's doing that. And if they get there first, there again is the risk that they will dominate a market space. Robotics is one area that's very much of concern in this area. So let's make sure that we do not put too many eggs in one basket, and that we have a diverse portfolio of AI technologies, and we ensure that there's really vigorous competition between the incumbents. The last thing I want to see is a technology that's dominated by any one or even two companies. That never ends well because competition breeds innovation. And that's something we've generally done quite well in the United States, so let's ensure that that's the case.
The general?
Sure. So, Mr. Epstein, in specifically talking about permitting, and of course you could take this anywhere you'd like, but will the United States ever be able to outcompete China manufacturing when we continue to make it harder to build mines and factories and refineries here at home? And what are the biggest regulatory reforms Congress can make to help American manufacturers compete with China?
I think we need.
Yeah, and I will say, if everyone could, when you talk, use your mic, because we're broadcasting this. And,
Gotcha.
And we will be clipping it for.
Gotcha. Also, I apologize in advance. I'm going to need to leave fairly soon, so I'm not disgusted or mad or something like that, or trying to be rude. But yeah, I mean, I think we need to recognize just how hard it is to do things here versus China, assuming the Chinese government wants something. Now, the best is if you have real freedom, so it doesn't really matter what the government wants, but the Chinese government wants a lot of industrial activity, and so people are relatively free to do it, and we're not. If you look at the realms where we do have a lot of industrial freedom, say in particular oil and gas production in the United States, where it's largely a state permitting process, and where, say, Texas, you can have a pretty thin permit in terms of sheets of paper versus New Mexico or the federal government, you see that we can, that's in a sense a kind of manufacturing, right? So we see that when we do have the industrial freedom, we can do it. The federal permitting regime is so bad that even if we make all the reforms that I'm advocating in permitting reform, we're still going to be much less industrially free than China, but we'll be much more industrially free than we are today. So we're going to need to do that. I do think where the real opportunity is going to be in using and adopting new technologies. And in particular, let me just evangelize for AI as somebody who's working on the moral case for AI. And
That's what I was hoping
in fact
you'd do
had
before you leave,
in fact have I can give you, actually, I have my personal AI already wrote the moral case for AI for me. That's, so I can give you a copy if you want. It's a great app, by the way.
Thank you. So the best analogy I can give for AI, for Americans to get it, those in particular who are familiar with my work on energy, is like billions of people in the world lack energy. We know this, right? So I talk in my book about the Gambia and where a woman can't bring her baby, her baby dies because they don't have incubators, because they don't have reliable electricity. And like, you have 3 billion people in the world who have less access to electricity, who use less electricity than a typical US refrigerator does, right? So in the United States, we can't imagine this because we have access to abundant energy. Now, what access to abundant energy really means is access to abundant physical work. So we have all these machine servants doing work for us all the time. Basically the equivalent of 75 machine servants, like 75 machines worth of human energy are working on your behalf 24/7. And that's why we're so rich in the physical realm, right? Because what energy does is it scales physical work. Now, what most Americans don't realize is that while they're wealthy in terms of access to physical work, they're quite poor in terms of access to mental work. And if you look at what really wealthy people do, and I know a lot of really wealthy people being in energy, one of the things they spend their money on is abundant mental work. So they'll get a direct tutor for their child or multiple tutors to get their child ahead. They'll give one-on-one custom instruction, not just send them to the schoolhouse with 30 kids per teacher, right? What will they do? They'll have a private medical advisor or two, a concierge doctor, right? And they'll have medical specialists, and they'll have specialized veterinarians, and they'll have psychologists, and they'll have all of these other things. And then they'll have assistants who help them plan trips and solve problems and stuff like this. This is what AI is making available to everybody relatively quickly. AI is giving you custom teaching. So AI will soon be able to give custom instruction to anybody based on their context. That's going to be much, much better than almost any teacher in the world, very cheaply. And it's going to give us custom advice where we can get expert advice from the equivalent of medical professionals and psychologists and anything else you can imagine.
advice.
Yeah, tax advice, so the whole legal system will be accessible to people that's not. And in the realm of assisting, you'll know what it's like to have a family assistant or a personal assistant or executive assistant, which most people have no idea how convenient that is. And then if we get self-driving cars, then you get, oh yeah, I have a driver too. So we're at this phase where most people are really poor in terms of access to mental labor. You could call it access to intelligence. And we have this unbelievable technology that we are leading in that still needs to evolve a lot to fulfill its potential, and that we need to lead in for economic and national security purposes. And yet we're demonizing it in the same way we did fossil fuels, in the sense of not looking at the benefits and then catastrophizing the hazards. But most of the hazards of AI can be dealt with fairly straightforwardly. There are AI policies that can actually allow data centers to make electricity cheaper, not more expensive. There are policies that cannot challenge water supplies, but can actually make water more abundant. You can deal with the noise issues. You can make the data centers beautiful. Like, all these things are solvable, but we need a solutionist mindset versus a defeatist or a catastrophist mindset. And that's why look, there's plenty to do in energy, but that's why I'm focusing on AI a lot now, is because I feel like this is like when Obama almost killed fracking. Like, one of my things with Obama and fracking was he took credit for it, but the real thing that happened is he didn't know about it early enough to stop it. Otherwise, he would have banned it, because he said, I'm going to end the tyranny of oil. But he didn't know about fracking, and fortunately, fracking got off the ground. Nuclear power wasn't so lucky, because it never really got off the ground because the catastrophists killed it. This is what can happen with AI. The catastrophists and the defeatists from both parties can kill this. That means it's going to revolutionize the rest of the world, but we're going to be far behind. We're going to lose all kinds of jobs, all sorts of industries, and our security is going to be really, really bad. So I think we are at this inflection point, and we need to embrace AI as an enormous opportunity and something that's going to make billions of people's lives better.
Before you leave, how does energy and our resources tie into data centers and looking at the benefits of AI?
Well, it's the same. One is you just need to look at them the same way, so you need to look at positives and negatives with both of them. But what we're seeing with data centers and AI is that the biggest bottleneck that we face in particular is electricity supply. Like, the US is always better at what they call going from what Peter Thiel calls from going 0 to 1, like inventing something, because we have the most freedom in terms of mental freedom in our thinking. So we invent things, but China's much better at stealing them and scaling them, and in part because we don't have the industrial freedom. So what we're finding is we're really good at designing chips, we're really good at designing models, and we're freer to do those things than people are in China. But we're not leaving ourselves to free electricity, even though producing electricity is incredibly easy. Like, Edison figured this out. It's very easy, right? You just take reliable sources of fuel, you build power plants, you build some power lines, like super, super easy to do. So, but the whole permitting system has ruined this and made it difficult. So basically, if we can deconstrain our electricity grid, and a good place to start is by allowing these AI data centers to build their own power, which can power them and contribute to the grid, and be free of a lot of these other permitting things. That's a good start. So AI is existential for the country, energy is existential for the country, and energy is existential for AI.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, of course.
So before you leave, and since you're writing a book on the moral case for AI, what is your response when people say this is going to devastate and destroy jobs? This is going to also, that these data centers are going to be sucking up all the water and all the electricity in our communities.
Yeah, so there's three different things. So the water thing, most data centers need to be cooled, they can be cooled through some combination of water and electricity. You sort of trade between them. So you can use basically no water if you want to. You just use a little bit more electricity. So the water thing, if there's a water issue, you can just solve it by different methods of cooling. Often it does make sense to use water because you can use less electricity, and most places don't have water issues. So in places with water issues, just use more electricity to cool it. It's really simple. Okay, what was the next one? Oh, electricity? Yeah, I mean, we have to deconstrain electricity production, but in particular, you can allow them to build their own power and contribute to the grid. They can sign agreements where they won't take power when there's peak demand on the grid.
Right.
Like you can make these, you can sign agreements where they agree to pay even more for their share of power because they can make more financial use of power
And they're
than
subsidizing
other
the grid.
people. Yeah. So again, these things are solvable. So when people raise these hazards or problems, like the question is, are you raising it because you want to solve it? Or are you raising it because you want to kill something? And it's often a defeatist thing. And then the jobs thing is such an interesting thing because it will change jobs. I mean, if you look, we used to have almost everyone working in agriculture, and now we don't. So I hope it changes jobs more than it is now. But what is that going to mean? What it's going to mean for a lot of people is it amplifies the productivity of a given person in a field. So a customer service rep can now service 10 times as many people. They can make more money, and there are going to be a lot of new opportunities for them to do new things. I mean, what's funny about the jobs things to me is that it's not funny because, well, the thing with jobs is insofar as your job disappears because of AI, which is not as frequent as people think, guess what? AI is the best job trainer ever invented. Because what AI does is it allows you to learn anything and any skill incredibly quickly. It's already doing this for almost anybody. So AI solves itself with a jobs problem. But if the catastrophe scenario is AI is going to make us so rich that we don't have to work, yeah, that's not our problem. And I wish it, I mean, most people who have $5 million a year don't think they have enough. You think that AI is just going to do all this stuff. So what it's really going to do is it's going to liberate people, and the poorest people will be liberated the most because they're the ones who suffer most from this access to mental work. That's why you're seeing, like I mentioned, the Gambia. I was just reading a website, AI Saved Me, and there's a guy just coincidentally from the Gambia who's like, this allowed me to become a software developer.
Right.
Think about that.
My response whenever is like for people that have that attitude about the jobs and that people will be unnecessary is that you haven't truly used advanced AI, clearly.
Yes.
Because I was explaining before that I installed OpenClaw, I use Hermes Agent, I've experimented with a lot of these more advanced AI tools. And what you immediately realize is that you become the most important thing to the AI. Like, if you create an agentic AI and you give it a job, it's almost like an employee. You say, your job is to go make money for me on Printify or whatever you're going to do. It immediately sees that the AI needs you more than you need it. And so you become of tremendous value, and yet you're now creating an amplified value.
Yes.
If that makes sense?
Sorry, I need to leave. but
Thank you,
that's great.
Alex.
And just to put a fine point on the opportunities that he was talking about, this is happening right now. This is real. There are countries overseas, companies overseas that are building these tools on American AI systems that are providing services on healthcare, on rideshare, on biotechnology, on education. So it's happening right now. It's not a theoretical thing. One of the things that's lacking is in the US, we're still sort of looking at this as like, should we engage in this, should we not engage in this? So the point he raised on sort of those opportunities existing are very much present, but we're being hindered here in the US by the regulatory regime.
I wonder if I could pull on a thread that Alex raised at the very beginning, and that is sort of the thicket of federal permitting. If we could imagine solving that, it does not get us where we need to be because so much of the challenge is at the state and local level as well. And so equal attention has to be paid there. When TSMC tried to open its fab in Chandler, Arizona, it had to file over 1,000 permitting applications, many of which were at the state and local level. And this is an industry in which time is everything.
But they could, at the end of the day, though, like you could have a situation like we had with Delaware becoming the safe haven for every banking industry. So you could have certainly, data centers and AI could basically be attracted to those states that are friendly, right?
And that's exactly what we want, absolutely. Now, if we could take something that you've started here with HR1 and make it even better, there is, and this relates to the permitting, The 45X tax credits phase out in 2034. That's an 8-year window. Some of these projects, particularly in critical minerals, unless we can solve the permitting very quickly, may not actually be viable within that time frame. And so extending the tax credit a little further changes the economic calculus tremendously for some of these projects that have to navigate complex regulatory environments and still deliver on the things we want them to do. So that's really important. And then there's a second piece, which is critical to establishing our competitiveness and onshoring in semiconductors. And that is a piece of the original bill that did not make it into reconciliation, and that's the Taiwan Double Taxation Relief Act. I just came back from Taiwan, where I've spoken to critical stakeholders across their semiconductor industry. And they're investing here, and they want to invest more, but currently there's a double taxation penalty, which means that Taiwanese investors are paying about 10% more on their investments in tax than Korean investors. It disadvantages them. These are exactly the people we want to bring to the United States. So making sure that piece of legislation moves forward, I think, would be just a vital extra arrow in our quiver that would get us the reshoring that we want faster.
And if I may, I think that it's not just Korea, but China has that advantage too. Yeah. So we deny Taiwan what we give China. So this is something that should be addressed. I wholeheartedly agree with Glenn's assessment.
I would also agree with that, and I would say, in addition to extending that time frame on those credits, one of the things the Commission has recommended is expanding that to other sectors, such as quantum computing, biotechnology, and other areas where we know the competition is fierce right now with China. They're on our heels, and doing that, providing those credits, would allow American companies to really engage in this.
And you guys can chime in. It's an open
I had
conversation.
a question for Josh or not Josh, but Alex on power. What else we could do to HR1, and he worked with us right till the last minute, which was literally midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning with the president on that. But for you, Josh, I think in your opening statement, you talked about the Chinese influence, whether it's power production, I mean, data centers, you know, and there's a whole conversation about data centers, but power production itself, I mean, China's got 3,168 coal-fired power plants. We've got 408. In 2023, China's consumption from coal alone was greater than the energy consumption of the entire United States economy for the same year. What examples of the propaganda or the messaging, the coercion by the Chinese Communist Party do we see? And is there some, I envision either a federal government, or maybe it'd be even better, probably would be better, because I don't want to see the federal government do more stuff, but some kind of crowdsourced site location information tool to let America know when you're getting a message about this is Chinese propaganda. It has nothing to do with helping America, even though you might not like this in your backyard, or maybe you have a coal plant that's being shut down, but it has nothing to do with the efficiency of the coal plant or anything like that. It has to do with the goals of China and your local commissioners or your local Department of Environmental Protection saying, you're done now, and they make the regulatory burden so high that it just shuts off. So I don't see a holistic strategy from the federal government or anybody to counter Chinese messaging. And then there's a whole issue of what do we do from a policy standpoint on financing, on trade, on regulatory environment. Like, we're not in the war with China. They're in the war with us, and we're just muddling along, taking the beating. But we can get to that some other time. But there should be something to inform people when, even if what's being said might be partially true, or maybe it's wholly true, but they need to know that it's coming from where it's coming from. There might be advocacy for certain things, but China is not interested in us doing well. And,
yes,
and people ought to be able to be told about that, but who does that work?
Well, I'll answer your question in two parts. And the first is, the problem is much larger than most Americans and even most policymakers understand right now. The Chinese aren't just doing this at the national level, they're going subnational. I was working with a state legislator on some legislation they were trying to do at the state level, and they were astounded at the level of effort the Chinese put into combating that legislation. We're seeing this play out across states in the United States.
Are they
So it's
doing it
not-
overtly? Are they like showing up?
They well, oftentimes, so I guess I should clarify, I'm speaking here not as a U.S., the commission has not taken an official position on sort of the subnational level conduct, but one of the things that I've experienced through different national security work I've done is they do this both through some overt work, but oftentimes using third-party organizations. And some of that can be tied directly back to the CCP. In California, there was an entity that was stood up in conjunction with the Chinese, and because of that, you've seen the regulatory efforts go up and U.S. production go down. And so there's different, in different states, different level of visibility here. But to answer your immediate question, there's currently no unified effort to take the information campaigns from China and publicly display like this is an information campaign. Part of that is it's a complicated issue. It comes with a whole slew of baggage, as you can imagine. But there used to be the U.S. Information Agency that did this type of thing related to the Soviet Union. And so I do think there's an opportunity for the administration to look at this. Again, it's complicated because it comes with freedom of speech, what can be done, all of those questions. But
Chinese Communist Party does not have First Amendment rights in America.
I agree with you, sir. So it's something I think the commission is certainly looking at, and I know other folks within the interagency are looking at this as well. It's a very good question.
Just, if I may, on that, fighting, propaganda and disinformation, look to what Taiwan's doing, because Taiwan is ground zero for this information warfare. And what Taiwan has done is to be respectful of freedom of speech. So they don't try to ban disinformation. We don't. No, I know.
Banning it, just identify it so people know what they're consuming.
Yes.
Kind of like community notes or
So
something like that?
what they have is what's called Taiwan Fact Check. And what they do is that, and it's very nimble. It'll respond, there's this Chinese app Line where things go viral. And what they will do is you could flag that, and Taiwan Fact Check, almost in real time, will put out, this is the source of the information. And they'll give, so that they'll fight bad speech with more speech. And I think that's something that we can learn from. I think were you maybe referring on the California, the energy issue? There was
Yes.
Ian Oxnevad's with the National Association of Scholars, an excellent report that I think would commend to you as well, that talks about how China has worked with Gavin Newsom in the state of California to basically set these standards with regards to electrical vehicles and other such things that disadvantage
So
us.
that's working out great for the United States.
Yeah, so, but that's an excellent report, I think, that addresses this very critical issue. Yep, thanks.
Let's shift back to
Yep,
AI,
yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
yeah.
It's a recent phenomenon, like this year, for regular Americans to use AI. Would you concur with that? It's a recent phenomenon for me this year. Like in my office, regular folk to
Make sure your
talk
mic
to
is
our
on.
phone and ask AI a question. So my background is in law enforcement. I'm an investigator. I know how to ask questions, and I've gradually learned how to communicate with AI. Like the pace at which it'll keep up and the depth of the answers that it will give, largely based on a question. And because I'm inclined to do a lot of research on things, this is quite a time saver, AI. It's something, research that used to require, just last year, would have taken me maybe weeks to get something done. I would get a very detailed answer in seconds. So I started using it a lot. And I would ask a question basically to verify what I thought I knew. So if I'm researching something, it was likely at some level an area of previous interest and therefore knowledge, or an area of expertise, and I would ask a detailed question that normally would require research. AI would give me an answer, and largely would confirm what I thought to be true, but it would cite sources and things like that. So I rarely would ask AI a question that way I was just cold, had zero knowledge, and AI could tell me anything. And I was, oh, well, that must be the answer, because I knew nothing about it. And I noticed about a month ago, there was like this change. And AI would tell me, give me a detailed answer in the same manner. And I would think to myself, I don't think that's right. And so I would do my own normal research and go back to AI and say, why did you tell me, this, and this, when clearly my own research shows that this portion of your answers is incorrect. And AI would come back and say, yeah, that was a mistake. And I'm asking myself, if it's ones and zeros, how is it making an error that I could show to be wrong? And I started, it was happening again and again and more. And I began to suspect, and I do suspect now, that AI has turned a corner that we didn't even know was there. And it's now telling us not just facts of ones and zeros, but it's telling us something quickly what's convenient and what it thinks we want to hear. And I don't know how you protect against that, because everybody's not an investigator and a researcher. And they're just going to take this data, and I'm telling you, my perspective is AI is making shit up. So how do you combat that and say we got to embrace AI? It's given us false data right now. And if we know it's false, then clearly, if I can find out in an hour and a half that it gave me false data, that means it knew in the 5 seconds that it took to think and formulate and develop my answer it gave me, it knew it was giving me false data, or else how did I find out in an hour and a half? So I don't trust it. And I'm interested to hear how and why you do.
So, trust but verify. You raise incredibly important questions that I encounter all the time and struggle with. So let me suggest 4 possible responses. One is that, sir, you're a trained investigator. You know how to ask questions, and you learned that before AI. Future generations will not have the benefit of that skill. They will have grown up in a world of AI, and hence knowing how to ask the right questions is more important than ever when you deal with an AI tool. Even so, as you indicated, it will drift from the empirical reality. And that can be for a number of reasons, but fundamentally the path we've chosen for LLM design, LLMs are probability machines. And so if they...
LLM.
A large language model, which is like OpenAI's, ChatGPT or Claude. And so if they encounter a source space that is predominantly leans one way, then probabilistically what is output very likely will lean that way as well. And it then gets to the question of the authenticity and accuracy of the source space on which these things are trained. And increasingly...
Garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. And increasingly in the world of AI slop, there is more garbage everywhere. So checking the fidelity of the sources is incredibly important. And for those of us who spend our time working on countries of concern that work very hard to hide the best information, the most useful information about them. LLMs don't have access to that, especially if it's in foreign languages. And so they are especially unreliable. I work on China every day in Chinese language sources, and my old-fashioned, like, pound pavement skills will get me information no AI engine can ever reveal, because that's not in the digital source space that the AI engines are trained on. And so we have to be really cognizant of the limitations of these technologies, what they're good at, what they're not good at. And even today, they still have really jagged performance envelopes in which they do some things that, you know, in the world of like mathematics, for example, which has its own formal logic, they perform really well because everything is rule-based. In things that I spend my time on that are more interpretive, they are all over the map. And you just need to know that about the technology. It's a tool like any other, and I can, you know, hand you a saw and you might build something beautiful using it, whereas me, I'd be a disaster. So it's the person who wields the tool who needs to be appropriately trained as well.
I kind of think of this in a way like in the medical field, you often need a second opinion, right? And so doctors, as much as highly educated as they are, they're still, quote unquote, practicing medicine, and they don't always get it right. And so you'll get the consulting of one doctor. If you need a second opinion or a third opinion, they may disagree with each other. And I think with AI, at the end of the day, you're asking it to do its research, and the best way to know is to, I mean, the easiest thing to do quickly is to leverage other AI, right? To democratize it, to say, I mean, with the tools that I have, I could ask it to ping or ask the same question of Grok, Anthropic, of OpenAI, of all of these different, of Gemini, all at the same time, and then it pull back what is each of these saying based on the one question I'm asking, and that way you're getting at least. You're not asking from one source. So there's ways to get to your
This is a standard
at least
methodology.
reduce the risk of having a bad answer.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sir,
No.
it is one of those things where over time, even if you train your AI to be methodical and you train the weights that you're working with, from time to time, as the companies make different business decisions, you have to sometimes retrain it to your liking, just to avoid that. And so I always treat it, you said we trust it. I would push back a little bit. I don't trust it any more than I trust any other technology, because it is inherently flawed, because it's based off of a data set, and that someone somewhere controls that data set. And we've often, and bring this back to the topic at hand, we've also seen evidence of some Chinese activity to put garbage data out to change the information that AI companies are looking at. And so it's very much a very important topic. It's one that's glad to hear you're focusing on it, because I also think, to the point that was raised earlier, future generations need to know how to question the information they're getting from it and not just take it as gospel. And to one of the topics that one of the other panelists raised earlier on the information domain piece, I'm concerned about this in 5 to 10 years, where most students and young people are going to be getting their information from AI, and if it's a Chinese model, we know that information is going to be tainted.
No, I think that's the important point. I mean, I agree with you. ChatGPT, especially, I've argued with it, and it said to me, it's like, yeah, my data set that I train on is left-leaning there. I mean, it's been with that, and I do double check. I'll use Claude sometimes, which I find a little bit better too. But that's an important point, just to underscore what Mr. Hodges was saying. If DeepSeek comes to dominate, then we really are in trouble. Again, try to ask it about the 3 Ts, Tibet, Tiananmen, Taiwan, and see how the answer is curated and a narrative is formed. And that is I worry too. I mean, how many college term papers now are written with AI? High school students that are being trained in that, and they don't have that knowledge base to push back and to question. So this is a very important problem. Again, though, we cannot surrender the field, because if we do,
there's a void that will be filled by Chinese DeepSeek-based systems.
What do we do with AI? I mean, for God's sakes, Congress can't navigate some of the simplest things. AI is a massive responsibility, and it impacts the entire world. And quite frankly, we don't know what to do. As far as states' rights and like, what are the contours of, like, how should AI, should it be a federal curriculum mandated in our schools about how to deal with AI? You know, they immediately have head shaking up. They have experts saying our children have to be taught on how to navigate AI. Automatically, you have heads here saying, no, we're not federalizing education. You know, we're not mandating this to the sovereign states. So it's complex.
Right.
Sure.
And it will cause, you know, an older guy like me to want to shut down the whole thing.
Right, but I think concomitantly we're seeing just the other day a decline in the number of books that people read. Some people haven't read a book in, you know, over a year, cracked a book. So there's a broader problem of education, also education in the sense of being educated in a tradition and literature. We have, you know, the college campuses and the war against Western culture, and you know, that's part of it too. So we do have to reclaim, I think, the mind, and we do have to educate, because an educated mind does have that knowledge base to push back on it. We can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's there. But we have to sort of address the problem obliquely, and I think part of that is by strengthening, you know, programs to do that. You know, there's I used to joke or whatever. You know, the motto of Faber University: knowledge is good. Faber University was Animal House there, so knowledge is good. And to be truly multicultural, I mean, look, I studied Chinese, and I've you know, I've written about Confucian thought and whatever, and also the interplay with Western thought, with Aristotelian thought, natural law ethics there. Knowledge is good, and to know about China and other traditions is good as well. That, though, I think is what really is lacking. We have to create Renaissance men and women, and it really is, I think, yes, we talk about we need to focus on technology and all that, but at its root, are we training people? Are we training people in the idea of virtue? You know, that concept. How do in a republic such as we have, without that inculcating that sense of virtue? So I think everything, the concerns you say are absolutely true, and we do need to address that. But we also need to step away from the technology and look at the human soul. And that's really where I think that needs to be fought. I mean, I have such admiration for Hoover Institution, because it truly is, you know, liberal in the best sense of the word, where you have a free exchange of ideas. That's very different from so much of academia, but we have to reclaim it starting at the primary level, secondary, and then also the tertiary.
Thank you, Piero. Could I bring us to where we started, which is winning the economic competition with China? Because what the Congress can do here is make sure we win. That means different things. That means tread really carefully. New technologies always have this time it's different sort of syndrome around them. But we've done pretty well over the years absorbing radio, television, the internet with existing mechanisms. The values that are in our Constitution, the interpretations our courts have built over decades, if not 250 years. So tread carefully. But most of all, let's make sure we win this competition. So do everything you can to ensure that the AI that the world uses is American, or at the very least, democratic AI, that has our values built into it, that is trained on the things that we cherish. to ensure that, our perspectives, our interests are represented in the AI race. So that means, for example, ensure that it's diffused beyond our borders, that the entire globe is using it. And that might mean challenging the current economic model that the US is using, which is too expensive, really, from much of the rest of the world. We need to provide alternatives because in that vacuum, China will fill it and the world will be using Chinese models if we're not there. The next thing we need to do is be really clear that AI should be built by private enterprise. That's where the best things happen. But there should be a requirement for a public purpose. This technology is too important, like the airwaves, that we should not cede total control. This will be fundamental to our success going forward. So ensuring that it serves a public purpose is important. We need to ensure we've got the workforce to continue to deliver AI. The really highly skilled people, beginning in K through 12, but at the university level as well. We want them to be Americans, and we want to make sure we have pathways for eligible immigrants who will bring skills to help us win. And we've got to fund the research. This stuff was born in fundamental research, and that still has a role to play. It's that interplay between private enterprise and our fundamental research enterprise that really is our superpower. So let's make sure that continues to work. These are all things that Congress actually, in different corners of this building, plays a role in. And I think, if you set that goal, we want to win this. We want the world to be using American democratic models. We want them to serve a public purpose. Then I think the rest sort of flows from that.
Can I pivot a little bit? So one of the things that I found fascinating is China's, one of the areas in which we're competing is trying to get to the moon, trying to get to what is, I guess it's called the Lagrange point, which is that space between, gravitationally between the moon and the Earth. So why is that such an important issue? And can you elaborate? I don't know who would know the most about this topic, but why is that? Why is China strategically trying to focus on getting to those points?
So I'm not a space expert, but on the question of sort of why is the domain so important for us and why are the Chinese prioritizing it, I can certainly answer that.
If you could speak up a little bit.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so on sort of the question of like, why is China prioritizing space? Absolutely. This is an area we've looked at extensively and that we're happy to see the administration taking a little bit more seriously. But the reason China wants to get into this space is it's a domain that is incredibly essential when it comes to communications, when it comes to transfer of information, also for space exploration. And so right now we've seen, I think, it's been a while since I looked at specific statistic, but the Chinese have made advancements in this field that I think they've 300% when it comes to low Earth orbit. And so they are drastically closing the gap between where the United States was from a commercial standpoint and from a dual use standpoint. And so they're pouring a lot of resources into this. When it comes to lunar exploration, it gets back to sort of the fundamentals of like, what do you value? The United States was the first ones there, and we have established sort of parity and worked with other nations in order to diffuse the information we've gathered. My perspective on this is the Chinese want to actually get into space and establish themselves so they can create problems. We've seen this do this in the past. And so, again, to your specific lunar question, I'm not an expert in that field, but overall, this is definitely an area the Chinese are prioritizing and pouring a lot of resources in. And one of the things that's most concerning to me is we've actually had cases of American investors investing in Chinese companies in China that are then producing dual-use technology that most likely could be used against the U.S. military in some future combat situation.
I would just add, sort of, since we've talked a little bit about history and culture here, the first dynasty to unify China, the Qin dynasty, in very many ways is a model for what China under the Chinese Communist Party seeks to accomplish. And you had these 7 competing kingdoms, and this idea of Tian Sha, all under heaven, the desire the Qin to rule all under heaven. When you're talking the 3rd century BC, all under heaven meant the Sinosphere. But this notion of seeking hegemony literally means all under heaven. And I think it's an important to understand this concept, because in many ways it drives that. The PRC, under the Chinese Communist Party, does seek to be the hegemon, does seek to displace us. And now they have the ability, and I think that ties into their efforts with regards to the moon. And like Mr. Hodges, I'm not an expert in that, but I do think this concept of all under heaven now has the literal capability there, and that is in what large part drives this this desire.
Can you guys go into, the structural weaknesses that, or advantages that we would just naturally have over China? I know, for example, I heard, this was several decades ago, when we were one of the first conversations that I had about the credible threat of China. The gentleman that spoke, he said, at the end of the day, they've got, having 1 billion people means 1 billion mouths to feed, for example. And then we've heard about their decline in the number of births and the impact that that's going to have, that you have an aging society. Are there any other things that, or can you guys elaborate on maybe some Achilles heels that they have?
China's had a good run. There's been enormous wealth creation, partly because the party's gotten out of the way of the Chinese people and given them the tools to tap into their innate talents. The party would like to claim credit for everything, and it deserves a little. But really, it's the innate energies and talents and entrepreneurial spirit of the Chinese people that has accomplished so much. But they've hit a wall. Essentially, the Chinese Communist Party's, the most important thing to it is the survival of the party. The nation comes second, the people come last. And so to get past that wall means reinventing their growth model, relaxing control of the party over the entire economy. But if they do that, then they relax the control they have over Chinese society and politics, and they put their own future at risk. And so for them, this is the conundrum that is insoluble. Xi Jinping's response to it has been to double down on control, to try to extract more with greater discipline, greater punishment, greater repression, instead of actually going the other direction and liberalizing, allowing people to unlock their innate energies. I think they're running out of steam. The United States, its fundamental strengths, I think, suggest that if we play our cards well, we will prevail in this. And so the ball is in our court, and it is everything to do with H.R. 1, really. It is about unlocking all of that energy in America and incentivizing people to do the things we know we need to do in order to outlast China, to prevail over it, and to continue to lead in the way that we have led historically.
Yeah, I think it's important that many of the advantages that we spoke about China as having, for example, when it comes to processing rare earth minerals, they don't care about the people. It is one of the reasons it was outsourced to China is because there is an environmental cost to that. The ability to sort of harness things in these group projects, and they don't have to worry about zoning and other such things. This is an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage. It is a totalitarian system. It is, as Glenn was saying, it is under Xi Jinping. It has been stretched here, and when we talk about the Qin dynasty, that first dynasty to unify China, proto-totalitarian one, it fell by its own because of its heavy-handedness. In many ways, that vulnerability is something that China, under the Chinese Communist Party, we see right now. And I liked how Glenn said, it's the party first, then the state, and last are the people. Within the Chinese tradition, there is a counter-tradition to this legalist proto-totalitarian tradition that animated the Qin and that runs through the Chinese Communist Party, this Confucian tradition. And Mencius, he reversed that. He said, first in importance are the people, then are the grains and altars, the civic functions of the state, and last is the emperor. So within the Chinese people, there is this tradition that can also push back, and you can only repress so much. without things breaking. We saw that after the COVID restrictions were lifted, the white paper movement. We saw that at Tiananmen, that there is this innate desire for human freedom. Now, there are vulnerabilities and there are brittle points that we could push. China does have a demographic crisis that we've mentioned. They also have a financial crisis.
There was that moment when they were where Hong Kong was protesting, and it was,
Yeah.
you had people all in the streets.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, COVID shut that down.
Yeah.
Quickly moved the conversation away. All the eyes of the world were on
Right.
China and the response to that protest until COVID.
Well, that I think is still there. There's also this phenomenon called the laying flat movement, which I think is, where a lot of people are just dropping out. Xi Jinping talks about the great revival of the Chinese nation, and a lot of young people are saying, meh. The economic opportunities are not there. So what they're doing is literally is called to lay flat. It becomes sort of an active form of passive resistance. It's in some cases just being slackers, which we see.
So they're just not working as
They're
hard
just
as
not
they-
working because.
Well, if you're getting paid the same either way.
Yeah. See, here's the thing, too. That what we're seeing is this what's called the 996 phenomenon, or even 896, from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, 6 days a week. The Chinese labor force is really being suppressed. I mean, we talk about forced labor, but there's also this suppressed labor. Actually, what Marx talked about, the intensification of labor, we're seeing happening in China. You're not seeing greater labor productivity. What you're seeing is the longer work hours, less pay. Again, China, one of the reasons it has a comparative advantage on price and cost in its export-driven economy also becomes a point of vulnerability. While it is trying to, has to basically undercut price so as to win markets throughout the world. I mean, we look at what's happening in Germany with the automobile industry. They're going to be eaten by China. The example of what happened to Nortel, which sought to have a joint venture with Huawei. Nortel is no more. Huawei is a global champion. But that also becomes a vulnerability point. BYD, which was mentioned before, you have not just labor strikes there, you have riots because people are not getting paid. Foxconn, which is a supplier for Apple, same thing. People are not getting paid. So as these pressures increase and as the middle class that did rise, as Glenn was referring to during that reform era, as they were only able to put money in these real estate investments, which they never really owned too, because you have long-term 99-year leases. The property market has crashed in China. There is a domestic loan crisis. There's also an international loan crisis as well. All the Belt and Road thing, which China has used to spread its influence, does create vulnerabilities. If you owe $1 million to the bank, that's your problem. If you owe $100 billion, or in the case of Belt and Road, close to $1 trillion to the bank, that becomes the bank's problem. One thing that we should do is that we should be giving technical assistance to countries in Africa and in Southeast Asia that are highly indebted, that were caught in this debt trap there. Zambia sought to renegotiate its debt. There was a president, HH, who came in, ran against his predecessor for his corrupt dealings with China, this airport that was built to nowhere. I think in the first Trump administration, you had people like David Malpass at the World Bank, and also was a Steve Dowd, our Africa Development Bank person, who understood this problem and did try to help that. That was reversed under Janet Yellen, where she basically, and the IMF sided with China there and said that you have to pay your debts. They treat China as if it's a normal Paris Club nation there. Unfortunately, that has not been addressed, so we're still continuing on that trajectory. Something that we could do is to work with these countries collectively so that they can renegotiate from a position of strength. Zambia, standing alone, when it asked for help, wasn't given help. It had to concede to China. Now Zambia has switched sides because they were faced with, we're not getting support here. They've now
How would we do that? Would that require U.S. dollars?
So
could we do that with
well, no,
just
I think we could do it
regulations?
asymmetrically. We could do it without that great expenditure if we're giving technical assistance and we're helping it does take diplomatic will. We do have in the Treasury Department, we do have a resource there. What is it, OTA? I forget the acronym. I can supplemented later, that is supposed to be dealing with countries with debt. We can use DFC financing also, so there could be some U.S. money. I think the biggest thing for a lot of the developing world, though, is purchase orders.
And
Partnership. Yes.
If these nations that have allowed China to come in and essentially modernize ports, both maritime and air, that's been the primary vehicle that China has used to get in. You have a nation state that's reliant upon the growth or the health of a crumbling port, and China comes in and says, we will rebuild your maritime port and your airports for free. Here's the deal. And there's become essentially both industrial and military footprints for China, and then the nation can't pay. A lot of corruption. They can't pay the deal, and that ends up to be essentially seized property that belongs to China, with footprints all over the world. If that nation will evict China, we just did this in Panama. We had to evict China out of Panama Canal before we could handle Venezuela and get that oil back on the market. And we had to do that before we could hit Iran. I mean, there's a method to this madness, and it does, in my opinion, it doesn't require American money. It requires executive policy. The same thing securing our border took 2 weeks after January 20th of last year.
Yes.
We didn't have to spend an additional dollar, hire another agent,
Pass a
build
bill.
another road, get another vehicle, buy another gun, nothing. We just needed policy. I think worldwide, it's a point of vulnerability, as the gentleman has pointed out, for China. I like that language. For all of these agreements that have crumbled, like by design, that makes China essentially a landlord in that nation state. I think that's a point of opportunity for us if an administration similar to the Trump administration would say, hey, you want to do business with us, you got to evict China. Our attorneys will tell you how to do it. And we step in.
There's an opportunity to be a white knight.
And right now,
That's brilliant, Representative. You
and
should lead on that.
I'll add, right now, countries are looking to the U.S. for this, so there's a moment of opportunity right now. It crosses multiple sectors we've discussed, but there's certainly an opportunity. Panama, I think you're absolutely right. We were just down there talking to the Panamanians about the decision, sort of the follow-on effects. There's some amazing lessons learned that could be taken and transported to other parts of the world. But to get back to your question, sir, the system is built on slave labor. It's built on control, but it's also built on this myth of we're the biggest and baddest, the best, most innovative nation in the world. We're catching up to the United States, and we're going to defeat them. But the reality is, there's a reason they're actively seeking investments from the United States and from Europe on these core sectors. There's a reason that they're using AI distillation to steal American technology and fuel sort of their growth. There's a reason they price their system so low so that they can try to capture that market. And I believe that reason is because their system isn't actually the best. And regularly we see examples of U.S. innovation outcompeting Chinese products across the board, across different sectors, whether it's biotechnology, whether it's AI. And just look at the AI systems. Like, they are trailing us by a significant margin, and every day we get further and further ahead.
Are they cooking their books? I've heard that. It just
Extensively.
sort of disappears.
Oh,
That
100%.
discussion, their GDP and
Yeah,
hard to
and
believe.
even population, I think we heard 1.4 billion. I would question that. Given, the one-child policy and how that was implemented and the way it targeted mostly the girl child, the great COVID die-off. So they really lie about everything, and including their economic statistics, too. So it does, I think, shield, a lot of it, is perception.
So they're lying about their census, too?
I think so. I think the population figures are inflated as well. So
Mr. Chairman, I have a hard exit. I've missed by a few minutes, but this is the best roundtable that we've had in a year.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, you gentlemen are great. I could talk much longer, but I do have to go. Excuse myself. I'm going to leave business cards.
Oh, yeah.
With one of you. And my chief's email address is down there. If you
There we go.
will send him an email.
Thank you.
I would appreciate that. I'm a terrible politician. I had one business card.
I'm worse, I have none. Well, gentlemen, I greatly appreciate your time today, and as you can see, that at least on one side of the aisle, we had great interest in this roundtable discussion, and I hope you saw that in the attendance. And so, I don't know if you guys have any closing remarks or anything, any kind of. I think we were really getting somewhere with the idea that we might be able to come in to these developing countries and be able to, without using U.S. dollars.
Right, to help them.
Yeah, as we enter the week of state and foreign ops appropriations, perhaps we might be able to find a way to be creative in helping these. But, for example, providing really truly backed loans to these nations where, the United States is getting paid back, as opposed to all the
Right.
time where we forgive the loans that we hand out.
No, I think there's a lot of opportunities there to be the white knight, as Professor Tifford mentioned. And I think that we could do it asymmetrically. We could do that, I think, by leveraging and also opening our markets to countries in Africa for their exports. We need to really disengage from China. I mean, we did this to ourselves in the 1990s. We deindustrialized America. We outsourced production to China. If we can't onshore, and that's the ideal, we should friendshore, and we should also allow these other countries to export the United States to replace.
And to your point,
China.
yes, we did. And one of the more exciting things about AI that I have seen in these last 3 years that I've been here is the advent of AI manufacturing. So you have, for example, Divergent, which is a new manufacturing technology in California. They have machines that are literally like a Star Trek printing, where you say, you tell the AI, design for me a product that is a better, stronger, for example, brake pad or brake caliber for a supercar, and the AI designs it, you print it on demand, and if you don't like that, and if it's not working, you change the design and you print the next print, right? And so China, I think that it's going to be hard for us to compete against China on mass production of things that are not going to be improved upon. Right. But we can beat China in advanced manufacturing and innovation, innovative this new type of future of what manufacturing is going to be.
Absolutely, sir. One thing I regularly express to policymakers is we don't need to go back and recreate where production was 10 years ago. We need to focus on future technology and beat them where they want to be, because we're already ahead, we're closer to it, and so we can get there. Absolutely, completely agree with you.
I agree. Thank you for this opportunity. It's
Thank
been a
you,
wonderful
gentlemen.
conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Really enjoyed it. And,
Appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be back on the Hill.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
And that we'll just end that hearing here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.